Well, I just want to start out by thanking Chris and Jason for having me here tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I'm happy to be here to speak to all of you tonight and tell you about all of my trials and tribulations and all the success stories as well. So I will kind of start and say that I did my first hard money deal with Chris and Jason, and I was privileged enough to work with them and had an awesome experience. So for those of you who haven't worked with them yet, they're amazing to work with. So I started in the business about 20 years ago unofficially. I moved here from Miami, Florida, by way of Gainesville, Florida, went to University of Florida for undergrad, and started out as a press secretary on Capitol Hill, not knowing that I would ever get into real estate whatsoever. But that year, I was 22 years old, so I'm kind of telling my age, 20 years ago. But I bought my first home in the Eckington area of Washington, D.C., which at the time was a very emerging neighborhood. From that point on, I fell in love with the entire process. Like, I just wanted to understand everything there was to know about real estate. And after placing 15 offers on 14 properties and then finally getting the 15th offer in and winning a property that was $135,000 at the time, which I thought was insanely expensive, but sold it 3 years later for $450,000. So I left my job on Capitol Hill and decided real estate is where I wanted to be. So before I get into the rest of the stories, Flip Queen is my brand, and I started Flip Queen because I thought it was a really cool way to identify with my development side of things. I am a broker and agent and have been for 15 years, but as a developer and investor, I started that career just about 10 years ago. I do lead a team of 10 over at Compass Real Estate, and I am a managing partner at Infinity Capital Group, where I do most of my development and purchase my income-producing properties. Licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and like I said, I have about 15 years of official experience, because remember, I started 20 years ago unofficially. And I have to date flipped 35 properties, and I'm a 20-year resident of the DMV. So I already kind of got into purchasing my first property at 22. I was so hooked from making right around $250,000 in profit that I decided that I was ready to buy my second property at 25 years old. And what I wanted to do, because I knew I was going to be at a higher price point, is I wanted to buy a property that had a basement rental unit. So I bought in another emerging neighborhood in Trinidad in Northeast DC. And I bought a $300,000 property that I totally couldn't afford on my salary. But I made sure that the income-producing property was going to pay for at least half of my mortgage. So at the time, 20 years ago, interest rates, my first mortgage was 6.75%. My second mortgage was 11%. So my mortgage was right around $1,700 a month. And I was getting about $900 a month on my income-producing basement. At 26 years old is when I officially decided to get into being a real estate agent. And right around that time, everything just kind of happened for me. I joined a team. The team decided they wanted to open up a brokerage. I became their third partner at the brokerage. And then I bought my third property, which is a commercial property in the northwest region of Washington, D.C. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the U Street corridor, but it's right there on 9th and U, and it at the time was, to me, a lot of money again, $650,000 for a commercial space that we renovated and then used as our office space. After that, at 33, I decided to leave that brokerage and start my own company. At the time, it was called Sky Real Estate. And Sky Real Estate was a boutique brokerage, but also it was my first stab at getting into development, where my heart really was. Like, I didn't want to just sell, I wanted to develop. And being an agent, I had a really unique perspective on what buyers wanted. You know, I was working with them every day, so they were telling me, oh, we hate this layout. Why didn't they put enough closets in this house? You know, so the list of stuff went on. And I was like, what a unique opportunity for me to get into a market that I know very well now. I had been in the business then for 7 or 8 years and start doing development myself. So with that, after merging brokerages with RE/MAX and moving to Compass and building a team there, I was fully focused on the development side of things. So one of the things that people always ask me in terms of flipping or development is, when's a good time to use hard money versus bank money? And I kind of started in the reverse, because most people start using hard money, and I actually started using bank money. And the reason why I used bank money was because the deals that I was looking at were taking longer to develop. So they were at 6 to 9 months. My very first property was a property in Petworth, DC, and at the time, that was a $250,000 acquisition. So using bank money usually requires a lot more money down, usually about 20%. And at that time, I was like, okay, now we have to figure out how we're gonna do this. My partner at the time and I were like, okay, well, we have to use our own funds. So we used our own funds instead of using investment funds to come up with a down payment. So on our very first flip, the acquisition was $250,000. We spent about $150,000 in renovations, and then we sold that first property for $610,000. So it sounds like a lot of money, but you know, I know all of you probably watch HGTV, and they only give you those 4 breakdowns: sales price, construction costs, out sale. But there's a lot that goes on in between that. So what seems like it should be a $200,000 profit ends up being a $100,000 profit. So we made about $100,000 off of that first deal. And we used bank money because the rates were lower. We got 5.5%, versus using hard money, which usually ranges anywhere between 9 and 14% with points. The one thing that you have to think about in terms of investing is creating a strong pro forma. I see a lot of times, and I work with a lot of investors as an agent, a lot of times people have a very basic pro forma. The pro forma will not include, you know, a 6-month reserve for your mortgage. It will not include carrying costs outside of perhaps your mortgage. So the tighter your pro forma is, the more impactful, the more accurate your deal is going to be. So building a true pro forma, whether you're building it with yourself or the help of a mentor, however you're doing that, is very key to the success of doing a flip. Establishing a circle of resources. And now, as you get started in the business for first timers, it's a little harder to do, but getting referrals is probably the best way to grow your network. And the key referrals that you want to look at are lenders, whether they are hard money lenders or whether they are bank lenders or private lenders, however you're looking at that. And of course, you want a good base of agents who are not only very knowledgeable on the areas that you're looking in, but also who have some level of investment savviness. So they not only understand acquiring the deal and what a good deal is, but they're actually pulling comparables that are true comps. You know, sometimes people go to Zillow, they go to Redfin, and yes, you're getting calculations is really what you're getting in terms of comps, but you want someone that's there on the street that actually knows the difference between a certain subdivision, and if you're on one side of the subdivision, it may be a 10% difference in value versus the other side of the subdivision. So you really want to work with somebody who knows the market. Of course, title companies, you know, you want to leverage your resources with a good title company or several good title companies and build that relationship. And then the major thing is definitely contractors. I'll never forget on my first deal, it was going so well. You know, now it's a $150,000 budget. We are on the second payment of this deal, make that $50,000 payment, and then the contractor goes completely ghost on us. So now we have to find a contractor that's willing to finish someone else's job. And you would think that would be easy to do, but it's not so easy to do. It's really hard to find somebody that is going to go in and just finish off a job of someone else. So that was a learning experience in itself. I didn't have a whole pool of contractors to pull from. So that set my project back probably by a month and a half to interview contractors and figure out who was going to be the next contractor to finish up that project. And it also added, of course, to my budget because I was making mortgage payments as well as having to come up with a complete different payment structure. What would I do different? I get this question all the time, and if I had to go over and do it all over again, I would start out buying income-producing properties versus flipping. And even though I kind of bought an income-producing property, I mean, it was income-producing as my second property, it did have a basement rental. What I mean by that is I would buy a multi-unit. I would buy a 2, 3, 4-unit building and start out that way. That way I would be able to leverage the equity from that property and purchase more properties. I think it's a stronger way to start, even though I love flipping properties. I would also have a marketing campaign to acquire my own off-market deals. Right now, I work with a lot of wholesalers. They send me deals all the time. I'm constantly running numbers on deals. And the thing that happens, especially in the DMV market, and it may happen in other markets, but that's the market I'm familiar with, is that people mark up the wholesale deals so tremendously. They may have 3 wholesalers on the deal. By the time it gets to me and I vet the deal, there's no money in the game. If I had direct contact with the sellers, I wouldn't have that problem. So marketing my own off-market deals would allow me to make more money off of my flips. Partnering is the third thing that I would do different. How I started off was I was doing all my deals with a business partner, but what I mean by partnering in deals is doing creative deal structures. So for instance, right now, just yesterday, I've made an offer on a property for $400,000. The ARV on that property is $800,000. The renovation costs are about $150,000. So on that type of deal, I will 100% guarantee the loan as the main investor into that deal, but I will partner and do a down payment partner with 50%. And what I mean by that is, let's say for example, total cost to carry this project and to close on this project is right around $70,000. What I do is get $35,000 from partner A and partner B, and then when we split the profit, I will take 50% of the profit for assuming most of the risk by guaranteeing the loan, and then they will take 25% and 25% of the profit sharing. How to not make the deal work. So a lot of times what I see with my investor clients, and I've actually made this mistake myself several times, is forcing a deal to work. And when you force a deal to work, it's most likely not going to work. And what I mean by that is when you start playing around with the comparables, when you're like, oh, but I think I can get that high comp number. I think I can get 350, even though the lowest middle comp is 325. You're trying to force the deal to work. When you're playing around with the 70-30 ARV rule, and I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with that, so I'll just go ahead and explain it. And especially in hard money, the 70-30 rule is taking 70% of the after renovated value. So the after renovated value in this case, let's use $1 million. $1 million as the after renovated value, you're taking 70% of that, that's $700,000. So acquisition and construction has to make up that $700,000. If you're trying to squeeze those numbers so the deal works, it's not going to work because things happen when you're doing a deal. Pipes bust, roofs fall in, you build in contingencies into your pro forma. So you don't want to try to manipulate the pro forma to make things work, and you don't want to try to use a higher comp than you would typically use. You want to always use the lowest middle comp. And maybe Chris and Jason will disagree with me. Maybe they want to use the lowest comp. But lowest middle is my rule of thumb. Do not underestimate your construction costs, because usually your construction costs are higher than whatever you think they're going to be, and that's why we build in contingencies. So just make sure you get 2-3 quotes and take an average of that and make that your construction and add a 15% contingency to that so you have a true budget for that and you're not making the deal work. And always adhere to your timelines, because most of the time if the contractor tells you it's going to take 3 months, it means it's going to take 4 to 6 months. So you want to build all that into your pro forma. So for wealth builders of income producing properties. So one thing, people are always asking me about income producing properties, and I think one thing or 4 things that you want to think about is with a income producing property, you want to look at cash flow. So what is this property bringing me in monthly, and what kind of check are you getting on a monthly basis? So after you pay all the bills in this property, whether it's multi-unit or a single-family residential unit, what does that check look like? Appreciation, how is that property appreciating on a quarterly basis? Because the more it appreciates, the more equity you're getting. The more you're paying off on it monthly, the more equity you're building. And then, of course, you're paying down debt as the tenants pay the mortgage. And in the early years, it's harder to pay that long-term loan amount down, but after time, you're paying down the mortgage. And then, of course, there's depreciation and tax benefits that you can write off at the end of the year. So what do you need to get started if you're looking to flip or purchase income-producing properties? As we discussed before, you need an experienced realtor. You need a network of wholesalers, which is pretty easy to find if you're going to networking meetup events such as this, and they have specific ones for wholesalers and investors, and just keep a constant flow of meeting new people, because you never know who has the best deal. And lender partners, of course, whether they're hard money lenders, bank lenders, private lenders, you want a nice network of lenders, because depending on the deal, you may need hard money, or you may need private money or bank money. And then money partners. What I mean by money partners is kind of like what I was talking about before with creative deal structures. It may be a friend that has $30,000 that they don't know what to do with, or $50,000 that they don't know what to do with. And you can potentially put their money into a deal, pay them back with interest, or pay them back as part of the profit sharing, which is a great thing to do because it's a lot more money than having it sit in the bank or probably on the stock market right now. You want to leverage your relationships with attorneys, probate attorneys, bankruptcy attorneys, real estate attorneys, divorce attorneys. They all have first sight at who's getting divorced and selling their properties, who passed away and has to settle an estate. So this is a great way, if you have these contacts or to build these contacts, this is a way to leverage your network and have those opportunities. Sending mailings to absentee homeowners and owners who have inherited property, that's a great way as well to establish contacts, identifying tax auctions, and contacting and joining investor groups like this, as I mentioned before. And of course, the probate office is a great place to go. That's very time consuming, so there are databases that you can leverage with probate as well, but they do cost a little bit of money. And then local classifieds, you can always see things on there as well. Just some quick flipping facts in Maryland and Virginia. I couldn't find the true data on DC, so I didn't want to give you that. But in Maryland right now, the average house listing price is about $369. The average time to flip is about 198 days, and the average profit is right around $109,000 with a return on your investment of about almost 110%. So all that to say that you're in a great market in Maryland. If you're thinking about Virginia, the average price there is about $341. The average time to flip a little lower, about 184 days. And the average profit is a little lower, about $91,000, but your return on investment is awesome, 99%. So next steps, how do you get started in this business? What are the next steps? You want to get pre-approved, whether it's through a hard money lender, a regular lender, or if you just have that much cash, you can set that cash aside as well. You want to start previewing properties, so get your agent, get your wholesaler to identify some properties for you so you can start and start looking at properties with your contractor. Once you've identified a property, you want your agent to pull comps, and you can do your due diligence too, and look online and see if these comps are making sense to you. And send them to a few agents and measure them against each other and see what numbers are making most sense. And of course, you want to, most importantly, plug all these numbers into your pro forma and make sure that the deal works. And then make an offer. So my Flip Queen services include flip coaching, renovation planning, project management, financial projections, hiring contractors, interior and exterior design, market research and analysis, and investment partnerships. So for those of you who need guidance on getting started, I'm happy to assist with all of that as well.
So if I jump into the couple
Sure.
things? Yeah, you touched on a few things I wanted to expand on a little bit, because that's cool.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how you found your first couple deals and your most recent couple deals and what has changed in that time?
Sure. So my first couple of deals I found on MLS. It was a lot easier back then to find deals on multiple listing service. I would just get online and I would stalk MLS until I found something of interest, run the numbers, and then if it made sense, I would make an offer. In this market today, it's a lot different. It's rare that I find something on MLS. When I do, it's a multiple offer situation. It probably has at least 5 to 10 offers on it. So I like to use my network of wholesalers or even my agent network that knows that I'm an investor. They'll send me stuff before it goes on the market as well.
another one I wanted to ask about. What you mentioned a contractor interviewing process. What is your process like now after having done so many?
So I really like to get my contractors by referral. That way I can actually go and see work and I like them to be doing work in that moment, so I can actually go and see the work from the middle of the project or the beginning of the project towards the end of the project. It's harder to just find someone online or find someone and not really be able to see their work, because looking at pictures is one thing. I mean, they could be anyone's pictures for that matter, but going into a project and actually looking at a project that they're working on live from beginning to end it makes me feel more comfortable in the vetting process.
Did you hire GCs, or do you GC yourself and hire all the subs?
I do both. So, well, I don't GC myself because I'm not a GC, but I will hire subs through a GC, and I will hire a GC that will hire all the subs. It depends on the project. So like a cosmetic flip, for example, I might not need a general contractor for a cosmetic flip. It may just need a new kitchen with new cabinets, countertops, new flooring, so I won't need, permits and everything. But for my larger projects where I'm doing a condo conversion or I'm doing a full gut flip, I will hire a GC and he'll hire all the subs.
Got it. I remember you told me a story a while back when we did an interview, and this could definitely apply to some agents who want to get into investing. You used to shadow some of your clients who were investors, right?
I did. So early on, that's how I really fell in love with the investment side of things. Being an agent, I never thought that I would get into the investment developer side, but working with new investors and experienced investors really gave me a unique opportunity to shadow them. And, I would just take every opportunity I had to, whether they were meeting with a hard money lender or whether they were walking through a property getting a quote with a GC, that was an opportunity for me to learn. So as much as they would allow me to shadow them, I shadowed them. And I learned, and that's the way I really learned. I didn't learn through reading. I didn't learn through YouTube like most people learn today, but I learned through watching.
How do you balance everything you have going on now, from being an investor, agent, team leader? How does that look like day to day, week to week?
So it's a tough balance. And I'm a mom too, so that always makes it interesting. It's a combination of things, and I think we spoke about this in our interview last year, but it's a combination. When I am heavy on the agent side, I have to balance that out with being slower on the development side, and then that changes. When I'm higher on the development side, I'm lower on the agent sales side, which is great for me because I do have a team. So if I'm not able to service that many clients at the same time, then my team is able to do that for me. But it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of commitment, and it's really about balancing your days, having an admin day or having a day where you're doing showings, but another day where you're actually doing showings for yourself and looking at opportunities.
Very cool. We're going to do some more questions now, so anyone who has a question, or we also do like a mini version of Real Estate Shark Tank. If you want our opinion on a deal that you're working on, we're happy to do that too. Cher, Jason, myself. You want to start off with the question?
Could you describe your pro forma?
Oh, I wish I would have. I had it as part of my presentation, then I was like, I'm going to bore them. Okay. She asked if I had a copy of my pro forma. I don't, but I can certainly email you a copy if you give me your contact information afterward. My pro forma is very padded. Some people don't like it. I plan for the worst case scenario. So I want to build it a pad enough that I'm not disappointed when I sell the property. So I include, all the standard stuff in there, but I also include 3% seller subsidy, which depending on your price point can really eat into your profit. I include a project management fee in there because if I'm too busy, I want to hire the right person to manage the project. And make sure the contractor is doing what he's supposed to be doing. So generally speaking, when I've matched up my pro forma with other investors, they do say that mine is very padded, but I'm okay with that.
Did you get involved with Airbnb? I saw it on your profile. How did that start?
Sure. The question was, did I get involved with Airbnb? I did, and thanks for asking that. I didn't include that in the presentation, but I actually started out Airbnb-ing the second property that I spoke about, which was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1.5 bath on the upper level row house, and then a studio basement apartment below. I started Airbnb-ing the studio basement apartment. It was very new. I mean, it was probably when Airbnb first came out, so I was a little worried about how the whole process was going to work, but it actually turned out to be the best decision I ever made. That property, I had gone up at the time to about $1,100 in income on a studio, and I started out Airbnb-ing at $80 a night. I was making about $3,000 a month on my first month Airbnb-ing, so I virtually tripled what I was making as a regular market rental. I moved out of that property. My fiance forced me to the suburbs and started Airbnb-ing the top unit, and I was Airbnb-ing that for $175 a night. So total income with about a 97% occupancy rate. And I'm still Airbnb-ing. I'm making about $7,500 a month off of that particular house.
What state is that?
That's in DC. Yeah, it's right off of H Street. So location is going to be really important when you're Airbnb. I have some clients that Airbnb and they stay between a 70 to 80% occupancy rate. I was Airbnb-ing a Baltimore row house right next to Hopkins, and that was really about a 60% occupancy rate. So it wasn't worth it to me anymore. I ended up doing a regular market rate rental and just, building equity on that property.
So you mentioned about Virginia and Maryland being number 6 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, number 1 and 2.
You're putting me on the spot. I didn't even look at that because I was so focused on Maryland and Virginia.
Sure, question for you. So, are you focusing currently on, would you say, median housing price neighborhoods or a little bit higher than that? Just to make a comparison to areas of Baltimore or areas around here.
I do it all. I just need the numbers to make sense. So, like, for example, the deal I did with you guys, I was doing a Charles County deal. The acquisition price was $100,000. The renovation cost was $55,000, and the out number was right around $240,000. So for that was more of a cosmetic flip. I'll do those deals all day long because you can get in and out in 2 months. But then I do larger deals where I'm doing full condo conversions, and those condos are selling anywhere between $700,000 and $800,000. So I do think as the market is transitioning, because everyone's feeling it, my sweet spot right now and my focus is under $400,000.
Yeah, because those numbers you put up there earlier, the median housing price numbers are very similar to the types of loans that we're doing, loan amount wise. In Baltimore, $130,000 to $150,000 loan amounts, and in DC, $250,000 to $300,000 loan amounts, which is exactly the majority of them, because that's the median housing price neighborhoods, and that's where it typically gets the most traction.
Absolutely, and those houses are constantly moving. So, it's great to be in that price point, because when you're above that price point, those houses sit longer, and you do have to build that into your pro forma in terms of holding costs.
You mentioned a contractor that goes to.
Yeah.
How did you handle that contractor later on taking to court?
You know what? I thought about taking him to court, but by the time I hired the attorney and spent the time tracking him down, it just wasn't worth it to me. I have had investor clients that have taken their contractors to court and won, but you know what happens when you win? You still have to get the money from them. So that's a whole process in itself. So sometimes I think you have to make a decision on whether it's worth it to you to go through that process versus just finishing the project off and making the money that you want to make off of it versus that slowing you down.
Since you have the opportunity to shadow from experienced investors, do you give the same opportunity to new investors to shadow?
The question was, since I've shadowed investors, would I give the opportunity for new investors to shadow me? I do all the time. Investors shadow me. It's a matter of being able to keep up with my schedule. I think that's like the tricky part, because in order to shadow someone, you're basically married to their schedule. So you have to share calendars, you have to be willing to wake up early and, you know, spend late nights and Zoom, meet in person, do all of that. So I'm most definitely open to it and currently do it right now. It's just a matter of keeping up.
Anyone else have any other questions? Jump back on the way. There's a question.
Oh. I can't hear you. The question is, am I still an agent? Yes, I'm still a licensed associate broker and realtor, and I have a team of 10 agents. 9 of them are under me at Compass Real Estate. So I do sell and develop, and I split that pretty much 50-50. Sometimes, like I explained before, if I'm development heavy, that might be 70% of my focus, and sales maybe 30%, or that flip-flops. It really just depends on the market and how many deals that make sense. Well, sometimes it's the best of both worlds. Sometimes it's really hectic.
All right, sounds good.
Oh.
We have another question.
If someone wanted to join your team or something, or work with you, how much and what's the minimum amount he has to bring to the table?
So the question is, if someone wants to join my team, I guess I have a question for you. What team are you talking about? The investment team? It really depends on the deal. There's no minimum, you know, to do a development project. I've had investors come in at 10, 15,000 before. I've had people come in at 200,000. It really depends on how much money we're trying to raise and do the numbers make sense, because we don't want you to come into a deal and put $10,000 if you're just going to make a 5% return. The goal is always for you to at least make a 15% return or more.
So as a real estate agent, have you ever been in a position, like a legal position with sellers where they like accuse you of like stealing their house or something, or like because you're getting it at a lower off-market price, or has that ever an issue for you?
So the question is, have I as an agent ever experienced a seller being upset with me?
Yeah, that's a better. Yeah.
Upset with me for getting the house at a lower price?
I guess that.
Making an offer to buy,
Yeah.
being an agent, that whole thing.
I guess.
Well, yes, I actually have a very personal experience on this, and the seller was one of my friends. So on a 3-unit property in Trinidad, DC, it was a row house, and acquisition, when we got the property under contract, was $400,000. By the time we closed on the property values had risen to right around $450,000. We were under contract at $400,000, so she wanted to change the contract price. And unfortunately, that's not how the game works. We're under contract, and our contract was extended multiple times at $400,000. So she wasn't very happy at the closing table, but that's going to happen all the time. I mean, if you're going under contract, I can lowball. I lowball wholesale deals. I lowball MLS deals. It's part of the game. If you accept the offer and are moving forward, then I'm not going to feel bad about that.
I guess if I can maybe add to a question, isn't there a rule somewhere that you're supposed to disclose to your agent when you do such a transaction? I think that's what she's really getting at.
The
You're
ru-
an agent and a developer and an investor, so I usually disclose that. I think that's what you're trying to get at.
The question is, do you have to disclose if you're an agent when you're making an offer? Absolutely. You have to disclose, but that's not typically an issue. I mean, it's when you don't disclose, which I've seen people do as well. I just had a deal the other day where I was acting as the agent on the deal, and the entire deal, the listing agent kept talking about their partner. We get to settlement, and the settlement attorney was like, there's no partner, he's the agent on the deal. He just never disclosed.
So when you put a property under contract, how many days works best for you in terms of maximum amount of days to execute your closing?
As the agent or as the investor?
The investor.
So if I'm using hard money, I generally close in 10 to 14 days. You know, as soon as the title work can be completed, I'm closing. And as soon as the hard money lenders can, get the funds available. If I'm closing on a typical, commercial loan, then that's different. It usually takes about 30 to 45 days to close.
Yeah, I mean, I think they somewhat answer your question ideally as long as you can.
Yeah.
But you might get the property at a better price by being able to close quicker.
I had a lawyer tell me that, try to get 90 days, but, from a law perspective, and that'll allow you anything that goes wrong. But when you talk to realtors, they're a little apprehensive about trying to tie a property up for that long.
Yeah, that's really hard to do when you're in a competitive market. To hold off on a 90-day closing, you're most likely not going to win the deal unless it's a very non-competitive situation.
And also from experience, I mean, you try to buy yourself as much time as you can. Obviously, do property diligence, but you want to get that thing closed as quick as possible so you don't run into a situation like Cher ran into with her friend, where, who knows, she could have eventually just not signed paperwork, and then you could have gone into a lawsuit. So, rule of thumb is if you got a deal that's ready to go, get that thing as quick as possible. Get that thing closed before and get it off the streets.
Just to clarify, going back to the agent/investor thing, you say by law, you're not required to register and disclose.
No, by law, you are required to disclose that you're an agent. He
just didn't do it.
He didn't do it. Yes, and now he's unfortunately in a lawsuit, not because he didn't disclose, but because the work he did on the development project, he lied on the disclosures, seller disclosures. So now all of that is coming up in the court case.
Okay, just want to clear because that's what I knew about law.
Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever executed a deal where the seller has required you to pay X amount of dollars per day while the property is taken off the market?
Absolutely. The question is, have I ever been in a situation where I'm paying daily interest on a property while it's off the market or while I'm extending to get to closing?
I think where you see a deal, you get it, and they say, now that it's going to be under contract, I'm taking it off the market, so I'm charging you, let's just say $50 a day that this property is off the deal. Now, but when you go to closing, that money is waived, but if you don't ever close on it, then you have to pay it. Have you run across that?
Because they're charging you daily interest just in case you don't close on the loan. Yeah, it happens all the time.